sustainable, sustainable, sustainable. That's the most important thing here, because you don't get shredded overnight and you don't get frequently huge overnight. Welcome to Vigorous PEDs. I'm Coach Steve. What is the best stack for bulking and cutting? Well, testosterone is best. During a cutting phase, you have testosterone in the caloric deficit, and during your bulking phase, you have testosterone in a caloric surplus. And I really hope that helps. Thank you guys so much for watching. Okay. I'll explain further. Honestly, guys, there's no such thing as a best performance-enhancing drugs regarding whether you're in a cutting phase or the off-season. Again, bulking, it's not really a good word to describe your off-season for, because you don't want to add bulk. You want to add quality muscle mass. So let's just call it a cutting phase or an off-season phase. Yeah, well, let's just use that terminology. It's a little bit more favorable for overall productivity. So regardless of the phase you're in, you can use testosterone as a base. Most of the people that I, coached over the last decade responded pretty well to testosterone. If you didn't respond well to testosterone and you're considering nandrolone, well, you can just simply replace the word testosterone for nandrolone, because that's your preferred anabolic of choice. But we'll still mention testosterone in this video. So, again, during a cutting phase, you're trying to control calories, keep your protein sufficient, keep your fat intake sufficient. Otherwise, you get stuck making progress, or you go catabolic because your protein intake is not sufficient. And then you lower your carbohydrate intake to the lowest amount. You can still have a productive workout. And you don't need anything else besides testosterone. If you're enhanced, if you're drug-free, you don't need testosterone at all. But your diet is probably a little bit longer. It might be up to 6 months. Because in a steep caloric deficit, testosterone levels usually decline and sexual binding globulin levels go up. And now you have no more free testosterone. And it doesn't usually feel so good. So when you're enhanced, you lower your carbohydrate intake to a lowest effective amount that you can still have a good workout. And at one point, as the diet progresses, you might start to lose strength because you've been in a caloric deficit for a prolonged period of time. Now, when it happens, you can increase your testosterone dose to compensate for the lack of calories. So now you have more anabolic agents in your bloodstream to compensate for the lack of caloric intake that you've been having for the last couple of weeks, months, etc. So let's say you went from 3,500 calories to 3,000 calories. That worked for a certain period of time. Then you went from 3,000 to 2,500 calories simply by reducing your carbohydrate intake, and you keep your protein and fat intake stable, just to confirm that we're still on the right track here. Then after you've been on 2,500 calories for a while, you'll notice that your strength starts to decline. And of course, declining strength usually means declining muscle mass, as the body shifts a little bit of energy consumption from the lack of carbohydrates to stored muscle protein. And that's what we're trying to prevent. So what do we need to do? We need to increase protein synthesis. Now, we can increase protein intake to get a little bit of extra favorable protein synthesis. But in most cases, that is just simply your cue, the tipping point, the validation you need to increase your testosterone dosages to facilitate a little bit more anabolism for the food that you're consuming. Of course, it's the testosterone that increases the protein synthesis, and now you should be able to sustain, maintain, and perhaps increase the strength, allowing all that hard-earned muscle to stay during your cutting phase. And you don't need any other anabolic to facilitate the increase in protein synthesis. Testosterone is more than sufficient, and you will see a dose-dependent increase in protein synthesis, even though it starts to taper towards the higher dosages, because there's only so much testosterone you can take before, terrible side effects start to manifest. So ideally, you stick to the lowest effective dose during this cutting phase, even though, the lowest effective dose is probably a little bit higher, especially considering that your caloric intake is lower. So again, caloric intake goes down and overall anabolic intake usually goes up at one point. So when you reach your lowest effective dose, but you need more protein synthesis, you need more anabolics to maintain and sustain or perhaps increase your strength, you start looking at the other anabolics. And whether that's primobolan, boldenone, dihydroboldenone, nandrolone, trenbolone, mastrone, some of the orals, there's many choices out there, and none of these options will really contribute to a significant amount of extra fat loss. They will contribute to fat loss indirectly by sustaining your muscle mass and your overall metabolic rate, but they will not increase fat loss directly. Not the trenbolone, not the anavar, not the mastrone, not the primo, not the etc. Now, there's maybe something to say for halotestin, even though it's not really a sustainable option. I would limit halotestin exposure to maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks at maximum, if you're really advanced and experienced with your own body. And it's because halotestin has moderate affinity for the mineralocorticoid receptor and the glucocorticoid receptor, and could potentiate some additional fat loss through those pathways. But again, it's not the sustainable route, and usually halotestin is added at the end during a contest prep. But if you're doing a cutting phase just for a photo shoot, Superdrol is more than sufficient. So that's the way how you design your cutting phase. You take it step by step, and as the calories go down, it means you might have to increase your anabolic intake to the point you might have to add in a second or a third or maybe even a fourth compound. Again, we have to go by side effects of each individual compound that you add and stay with the lowest effective dose for the least amount of side effects. Now, during the off season, not the bulk, please don't say bulk ever again. During the off season, you can simply stay with bioidentical hormones. Really, it's not that complicated, guys. There doesn't need to be a stack. You can use testosterone as your anabolic-androgenic steroid, as your sole anabolic-androgenic steroid, and then add growth hormone on top. That's already sufficient to get so much synergy regarding hypertrophy, anabolism, recovery, and hyperplasia that a steep caloric surplus or a sufficient caloric surplus should be more than enough to facilitate a lot of new muscle tissue growth. Again, given that you're training insane, because hypertrophy, it doesn't happen for free. It doesn't happen for free, unfortunately. For some of the genetically blessed guys out there, they can look at a dumbbell and start to grow just from the pure excitement. But for, the average guy or the moderately genetically blessed bodybuilder, we still need to put in the work. So when people ask me for please give me a bulking stack, I just laugh and ask them, show me your most intense set, and then we can discuss what performance enhancing drugs you might need to recover from that intense set. Yeah, and I know it doesn't really sound sexy or appealing or exciting in any way, shape, or form, but that's the hard truth of it. You need to manage your caloric intake, whether you're doing a cutting phase or a bulking phase, and you're trying to limit your drug exposure to the lowest effective dose so you can keep yourself healthy. And it's that simple. Because all the performance enhancing drugs we can choose from, we can use in both scenarios. There's something to say for using nandrolone during a contest prep or cutting phase, even though it might add a little bit of water. Let's say you've been in this game for a while and you have a little bit of joint pain and you need a little bit of extra lubrication in the joints because, of course, nandrolone promotes water retention, even though you're just, masking the issue. And I feel that anavar is a much more potent compound to take to facilitate additional collagen synthesis. I mean, I can't really remember if any burn victims out there were prescribed nandrolone. And if they were, you can let me know down below in the comment section. But I believe that burn victims are prescribed anavar. So when you look at it logically, when you want additional collagen synthesis, anavar is preferred over nandrolone. But again, the padding of nandrolone and the joint protection, that you feel from this extra water retention, that's almost unmatched. And you can't use boldenone or even dianabol to get similar benefits. So low dose nandrolone, even though it's classified as an off-season compound, it might have some merit during a contest prep or cutting phase. And it's the same with trenbolone. Most guys would use it during a cutting phase, but it has some practical applications during the off-season as well, just to increase IGF-1 sensitivity and allow you to, increase your metabolic rate a little bit more and facilitate more muscle maturity. Because honestly, there's no really sustainable compound out there that really puts the muscle maturity on you. It puts a lot of mental madness on you as well. So it's always a bit of a trade-off. But like I said, you can use performance-enhancing drugs during the off-season or during a cutting phase. And you really have to go by your caloric intake and your overall anabolic intake, sticking with the lowest effective dose, to make sure that both approaches are sustainable. Again, sustainable, sustainable, sustainable. That's the most important thing here, because you don't get shredded overnight and you don't get frequently huge overnight. And if you're at the end of an off season and you're trying to squeeze out a little bit more extra strength, maybe the last 2 weeks, and you're eating a ton of food, and you physically can't eat anymore, but you're coming up to a deload in the last 2 weeks. You're like, I'm going to make the most of it, and then I'm going to cruise. Yes, by all means, add in the Anadrol or the Superdrol, or maybe even the Halotestin. A 2 week, closing the deal off with an oral. I'm all for it. And it's the same at the end of a cutting phase or a contest prep. You want to look your absolute best. Sprinkle a little bit of orals on top. They have practical applications. But you don't need to run an oral for your entire off-season or your entire cutting phase, unless, it's a low-dose Anavar for the collagen synthesis. Again, it's 5 milligrams. That's a bikini dose, and I know some of you guys are going to laugh. 5 milligrams. That's what bikini competitors use. Well, it's a sustainable route. We're looking for the sustainable route here. And I really hope that helps. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're looking for the most comprehensive guides to bodybuilding pharmacology, you can find those ebooks on my website, VigorousSteve.com/shop. If you're looking for personalized advice, you can contact me through the contact form for personalized advice by emails, 1-hour consultations, or bodybuilding coaching, which requires blood work, no service. I hope you understand. Follow me on Instagram at VigorousSteve. I would like to get my followers there up to my subscriber count here on YouTube, which is hands down beating the amount of followers that I have on Instagram. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.